Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving headfirst into a challenge that looms large over all of us.
Right.
Climate change. Last year alone, the United States pumped, 4.8 billion metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere globally. That number skyrocketed to an eye-watering 37.4 billion metric tons. Those are numbers that can feel, well, overwhelming, can't they? But our mission today is to kind of flip that script. We're exploring the genuinely innovative ways humanity is tackling this monumental problem, and not just by reducing emissions, but by actively removing CO2 from the air and forging entirely new paths to clean energy.
And that's the crucial pivot, isn't it? I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture, achieving carbon neutral or even carbon negative goals demands more than just cutting back.
Right.
Reducing emissions is absolutely vital. We have to do that, but it won't be enough on its own to address the carbon that's already built up.
So this isn't just theory anymore.
No, exactly. It's about practical, scalable solutions emerging right now. Solutions that are, frankly, our best hope for preventing irreversible damage.
Okay, so let's establish some common ground then. When we talk about carbon dioxide removal, or CDR, what exactly are we getting at? Is it the same as carbon capture, or is it broader?
It's definitely broader. Think of CDR as the umbrella term. It covers any process that collects CO2 and other greenhouse gases directly from the atmosphere and then stores it.
Okay.
Carbon capture often just means the collection part. And carbon sequestration, well, that's usually the long-term storage, though sometimes people use it to mean both capture and storage.
Gotcha.
Essentially, we're talking about actively reversing the buildup,
Yeah.
Pulling that carbon out and locking it away safely. And what's fascinating is how these methods fall into, broadly speaking, two camps.
For sure.
Leveraging nature's own incredible power or engineering these cutting-edge technological solutions.
Right. So where do we even start with this huge problem? I think for many people, the first thought goes to nature itself, and, for good reason.
Absolutely.
Let's delve into nature's carbon-capturing powerhouses. We often hear about green carbon and blue carbon, green from dry land plants, blue from wetlands and oceans. What's the fundamental difference?
It's really all about the environment where the carbon ends up being stored. Green carbon is what you find in terrestrial ecosystems, forests, grasslands, the soil on dry land. It's the carbon trees soak up.
Standard stuff we think about.
Yeah, pretty much. Blue carbon, though, that's the carbon sequestered in coastal and marine ecosystems. Think mangroves, salt marshes, seagrasses, and, well, the ocean itself. And these blue carbon sinks are incredibly efficient, often storing carbon for much, much longer periods.
Interesting. Okay, sticking with green carbon for a second. Forests. They're often seen as like our primary carbon champions, right? We know trees absorb CO2 through photosynthesis, storing it in their wood, their roots. I saw this stat. A single mature tree can absorb over 48 pounds of CO2 every year.
That's right.
And collectively, U.S. forests capture around 500 million metric tons a year. Apparently, older forests are even better, real carbon storage titans.
Yeah.
But is it always that straightforward, or are there, hidden complexities?
That's the crucial counter-insight. You've hit on a critical point there. While forests are powerful carbon sinks, the equation isn't always simple.
How so?
Well, when these ancient carbon-rich forests get clear-cut, or even worse, when they're ravaged by wildfires, all that stored carbon, it gets released straight back into the atmosphere.
Oh.
So it essentially flips them. They go from being a sink to being a major carbon source.
And just replanting doesn't fix it immediately.
Not at all. It takes decades for new growth, for young trees, to sequester anywhere near the amount of carbon that was just lost in that fire or clear cut. So the carbon released from the destroyed forest often cancels out years, maybe even decades of new capture. It's definitely not an immediate one-to-one swap.
That's a sobering thought. The fragility of even these big natural sinks. But what about another unsung hero? One that works its magic not in dry forests, but in, permanently wet soil. Wetlands. What makes them so good at locking away carbon?
Wetlands are, well, they're Mother Nature's ultimate safe deposit boxes for carbon. It's all down to their unique hydrology, the water.
Because they're waterlogged.
Exactly. Because the soils are saturated, oxygen is largely absent, and that slows down decomposition significantly. Unlike in upland forests, where decaying stuff releases CO2, in wetlands, the dead plants just stay saturated. They keep their carbon locked away in the soil for centuries, maybe even millennia.
Wow, so the scale is pretty big then.
Oh, the sheer magnitude is impressive. Wetlands can store 10 times more carbon per acre than equivalent upland forests.
10 times.
Seriously.
Seriously? Even a state like California, which we often think of as dry, has wetlands storing hundreds of thousands of tons every year.
So it's like a natural time capsule for carbon. But I guess, like forests, they're vulnerable to human activity.
Exactly the same problem. Just like deforestation, draining wetlands for development releases massive amounts of that stored carbon. And sure, there are regulations. Sometimes developers have to create new wetlands, but a newly created wetland needs many, many years to even come close to the carbon density of a mature natural one.
Right. It really shows how interconnected these systems are and how easily we can mess them up.
It does. It's a stark reminder.
Okay, what about our farms? Agricultural lands. They're essential for food, obviously, but can they also play a part in carbon removal?
Absolutely. Agricultural soils hold immense potential. Practices like planting annual cover crops after the main harvest, for instance. That not only limits erosion, which is good in itself, but it also actively pulls carbon from the atmosphere and locks it into the soil.
And things like not tilling the soil as much? That's another key one. Limiting tillage is crucial because conventional tilling churns up the soil, exposes all that organic matter to oxygen, and boom, releases stored carbon.
Yeah, I can see the pragmatic challenge here, though.
Yeah.
While a forest might be, a better pure carbon sink per acre, we need farmland to feed, what is it now, 8 billion people.
Precisely.
So it's a delicate balance, isn't it? We
Yeah.
can't just turn all our farms back into forests.
Exactly right. It highlights the need for a really nuanced approach to land use. We have to optimize our existing farmlands for carbon sequestration without compromising food security. It's about integrating smart agricultural practices, not just wholesale land conversion.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift our gaze from the land to the water now. Specifically, algae. Things like seaweed, microalgae. They're generating a lot of buzz as promising carbon capture alternatives.
Yeah.
What's the big deal with algae?
Well, the big deal is their incredible efficiency. Algae are basically microscopic powerhouses.
How efficient are we talking?
Right. They're estimated to fix almost half of all the green and blue carbon each year. And some studies suggest they can sequester up to 50 times more CO2 than land plants per unit area.
Whoa, 50 times. That's huge.
It is. So the idea here is to accelerate the ocean's natural carbon capture by just growing significantly more algae. Think of them as incredibly fast-growing, dense carbon sponges.
That's a remarkable statistic.
Yeah.
And beyond just soaking up carbon, do they have other uses, potential uses?
They absolutely do. Microalgae are incredibly versatile. They can tolerate salty water, extreme conditions.
Sure.
Beyond carbon removal, they have potential in other areas, like being converted into biofuels or used as high-nutrient fertilizers.
Okay.
The challenge, though, is scaling this up responsibly, making sure these other uses don't accidentally cancel out their primary carbon removal benefit, So more research is definitely needed to make large-scale algae cultivation a truly scalable and sustainable carbon solution.
Right. So nature is a powerful ally, but it has its own complexities, its own limits, maybe. What happens when human ingenuity really steps in to try and accelerate the process? We've talked about trees, wetlands, but now let's pivot to the labs and industrial sites, where these audacious, often cutting-edge solutions are being engineered from the ground up. One approach is carbon mineralization, also called enhanced weathering. Picture this. Turning atmospheric CO2 directly into stable rock. How on earth does that work?
It's essentially leveraging and massively speeding up a natural geological process. Carbon mineralization converts gaseous CO2 into a solid, stable carbonate form using specific minerals found in rocks like olivine and basalt.
Things that happen naturally over millennia.
Exact normally takes hundreds to thousands of years, so scientists are actively researching ways to accelerate this.
Yeah.
Ideas range from grinding these rocks into a fine dust to spread over soils, which increases the surface area for reactions, to exposing them to concentrated CO2 streams coming right out of industrial plants, or even just passing CO2-laden air through big piles of mineral-rich mine boulders or tailings.
And I heard there's been a big breakthrough on this from Stanford University recently, something about lower cost.
Yes, and it really could be a game changer. What's revolutionary here is their new, low-cost method. They're heating common silicate minerals, things we have lots of, with calcium oxide in conventional kilns, pretty much like the kilns used for making cement.
Okay, standard tech.
Right. This process transforms them into highly reactive forms, magnesium oxide and calcium silicate. And these materials then spontaneously, just on their own, pull CO2 right out of the atmosphere, forming stable carbonate minerals, solid rock, essentially.
So it's like a geological fast-forward button.
That's a great way to put it, a geological fast-forward button. This process is significantly faster than natural weathering. We're talking weeks or months instead of hundreds or thousands of years. And critically, it requires less than half the energy of the leading direct air capture technologies out there right now.
That's huge for viability.
Absolutely. Its scalability is also incredibly promising. It can use existing cement kiln designs, and the raw materials are abundant things like mine tailings, olivine, serpentine rocks, stuff we often have lying around as waste.
Any other benefits?
Yes, and here's a fascinating co-benefit, particularly for agriculture. These minerals, as they react, can improve soil pH, basically acting like agricultural lime. And they also release silicon, which is known to improve crop yields and make plants more resilient to stress. So farmers might actually pay for these beneficial minerals.
That's amazing. Turning a climate solution potentially into a valuable agricultural product.
Yeah.
Very clever.
It adds a really interesting layer of economic feasibility, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, another technological approach, one we hear about sometimes, is BECCS. That's biomass energy with carbon capture and storage. So the idea is you burn carbon-filled biomass, trees, grasses, whatever, to create electricity, and then you capture the CO2 emitted from that process and bury it underground. On paper, it sounds like a win-win, right? Clean energy and carbon removal. But what's the reality?
It sounds ideal, yes, but it requires a very, very delicate approach. While it's theoretically powerful, BECS faces some significant hurdles.
Like what?
Well, first, it demands vast amounts of land just for growing the biomass. That land could compete with food production or with natural ecosystems that we want to preserve.
Right, the land use issue again.
Exactly. Plus, the whole process, growing, harvesting, transporting that biomass, can consume significant fossil fuels itself, potentially canceling out some of the carbon benefits you were hoping for. And critically, the carbon capture technology itself, specifically designed for biomass plants. It's still in relatively early development for many BECCS applications compared to, say, capturing from a coal plant flue gas.
So the concept is sound, maybe, but the practical side, a long way to go.
A long way to go to ensure it's truly carbon negative across its whole life cycle. It needs careful management.
So given those hurdles, the land use, the fossil fuels needed, should we even be investing heavily in BECCS? Or are the benefits too theoretical right now?
I wouldn't say dismiss it entirely. It's more a question of balance and focusing investment on continued innovation. We need research to minimize its footprint, maybe using waste biomass instead of dedicated crops, and definitely maximize its capture efficiency. It's likely a piece of the puzzle for certain regions or industries, but probably not a standalone magic bullet right now.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's turn to a more established, maybe, though still expensive, tech solution. Carbon capture and storage, CCS, but at the source. So just to be clear, this isn't pulling CO2 that's already floating around in the general atmosphere. This is about grabbing it before it even leaves, say, a factory chimney, right? And then burying it deep underground.
Yeah.
Like a preemptive strike.
That's exactly it. Intercepting it at high concentrations where it's easier, relatively speaking, to capture.
And the poster child for this seems to be Norway's Northern Lights project. You called it the world's first commercial CO2 graveyard. Can you walk us through how that actually works?
Absolutely. The Northern Lights project is, well, it's an incredible feat of engineering, really. CO2 is captured directly from industrial smokestacks. A key example is from a Heidelberg Materials cement plant, actually located in Germany.
So they capture it in Germany.
Yeah.
Then what? Then
it's liquefied, put onto specially designed ships, and transported to a receiving terminal on the coast of Norway. From there, it's injected via a 110-kilometer pipeline, sent 2.6 kilometers deep beneath the North Sea seabed into a specific geological formation for permanent, secure storage.
Wow. That's a huge logistical chain.
Mm-hmm.
What's the real significance of this project, especially for industries that are traditionally really hard to decarbonize?
Its significance is precisely that it targets those hard-to-abate industries. Think cement, steel production, maybe some chemical processes.
Yeah.
Sectors where simply switching to renewable electricity isn't enough because the emissions come from the process itself, not just energy use.
Right.
So CCS is seen as a crucial climate tool, maybe even essential, for those specific sectors. The main challenge, however, remains cost. Big time.
It's expensive then.
Very. Currently, without significant financial assistance, government subsidies, tax credits, that sort of thing, or much higher carbon prices, it's often still more profitable for these industries to just buy pollution permits than to invest in the whole capture, transport, and storage infrastructure.
Even though the tech works.
Even though the tech works. Despite that economic hurdle, Northern Lights has an initial annual storage capacity of 1.5 million tons, and they have plans to expand that to 5 million tons relatively quickly. It really underscores the long-term potential and proves the concept at scale. Now it's about making the economics work.
Okay, shifting gears again. The ocean. It naturally plays this huge role, soaking up, 25–30% of our emissions?
Roughly, yes. It's a massive natural sink.
But scientists are also exploring ways to actively enhance this, to get the ocean to do even more. One project is Sea Curie in the UK, a pilot in Weymouth. How are they trying to supercharge the ocean's carbon removal?
Sea Curie works by taking in seawater and then making it slightly acidic. This chemical shift converts the dissolved bicarbonate ions into CO2 gas.
Okay, so it forces the CO2 out of the water.
Exactly. This gas is then stripped out and concentrated. They're actually using materials like charred coconut husks in the pilot, interestingly enough, getting it ready for storage or potential use. The seawater, now low in carbon, is neutralized back to its original pH and returned to the sea. Because its carbon concentration is lower than the surrounding water, it naturally starts absorbing more CO2 directly from the atmosphere to reach equilibrium again.
And the thinking is, this is more efficient.
Potentially, yeah. The rationale is that seawater contains about 150 times more dissolved carbon per unit volume than air contains CO2. So in theory, you could process less volume to get the same amount of carbon compared to direct air capture.
That sounds really promising.
Right.
But wait, doesn't manipulating ocean chemistry on a large scale raise some pretty big red flags for marine life?
It absolutely raises important questions, and that's the critical area of research right now. First, the energy required to pump and process such large volumes of water is huge. That needs to be clean energy, obviously.
Right.
And second, the environmental impact of discharging large quantities of this treated low-carbon water back into the ocean. That's a major concern. We need to understand precisely what effect this might have on marine organisms. Things like phytoplankton, the base of the marine food web, or mussels and corals that rely on dissolved carbonate ions to build their shells.
So we don't fully know the risks yet.
Early indications suggest there could be localized impacts if it's not managed carefully. So, rigorous research, continuous monitoring, and developing mitigation strategies, like maybe pre-diluting the treated water before discharge, are absolutely essential before anyone thinks about scaling this up significantly. Caution is key.
Definitely sounds like we need to proceed with extreme caution there. But there's another really interesting ocean-based project happening in Singapore. Aquatic One, said to be the world's largest of its kind starting in 2026. What's their approach? Is it different from Sea Curie?
It is different, yes, and quite ingenious, actually. Aquatic One uses an electrical current passed through the seawater. This splits the water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen, a process called electrolysis.
Okay.
As this happens, it also changes the local water chemistry in a way that encourages the dissolved CO2 already in the water to combine with naturally occurring minerals, like calcium and magnesium, which are also abundant in seawater. This forms stable, solid carbonate minerals, basically tiny particles of limestone or similar materials, and also stable dissolved bicarbonates. This effectively traps the CO2 in mineral form for at least 10,000 years. It's mimicking how seashells and coral skeletons form naturally.
Wow. So it's essentially creating artificial seashells or rock to lock away carbon. That's fascinating. And I heard it has a dual benefit.
That's right. That's a key part of their model.
Yeah.
Not only does it remove CO2 by mineralizing it, but the electrolysis process also co-produces hydrogen gas. And hydrogen is itself a clean energy source.
So you get carbon removal and clean fuel. Potentially, yes. This initial facility aims to remove about 10 tons of CO2 per day, which, sounds small compared to the global problem, but as a scaled-up plant, it's significant. It's equivalent to taking maybe 870 average passenger cars off the road permanently. And there's even talk that the solid carbonate materials produced could potentially be used in construction, like in concrete.
That's a remarkable example of finding multiple benefits, really integrated thinking.
It is. And again, though, while the dual benefit of hydrogen production is really compelling, the environmental concerns about manipulating ocean chemistry at scale still persist, just like with Sea Curie, though the mechanism is different. However, the project partners Singapore's National Parks Board, Aquatic itself, they're emphasizing continuous real-time monitoring and treatment of any water discharged back to the ocean. They have to ensure it meets stringent environmental standards. They're actively working to confirm that these processes don't alter the broader ocean chemistry in any harmful way. It just highlights, again, the absolute necessity of rigorous, transparent environmental assessment for all these emerging ocean technologies.
Absolutely crucial. It's really inspiring, though, to see all this ingenuity going into carbon removal. But, beyond actively removing carbon, there are equally vital innovations happening in clean energy generation itself, stuff that helps us avoid future emissions altogether.
Exactly. The fight against climate change isn't just about cleaning up the existing mess. It's fundamentally about building a cleaner way to power our future.
And we're seeing some incredible breakthroughs there, too. Take osmotic power, for instance, also known as salinity gradient power. I read Japan's first osmotic power plant started operating in Fukuoka in August 2025. How does simply mixing fresh water and salt water generate electricity? That sounds almost like magic.
It does sound a bit like magic, doesn't it? But it's based on a really fundamental physical principle, osmosis. Osmotic power generates electricity using the natural difference in salt concentration between seawater and freshwater when they're separated by a special semi-permeable membrane. Water naturally wants to move from an area of low salt concentration, freshwater, to an area of high salt concentration, seawater, to try and equalize things. This movement through the membrane creates pressure or flow that can be harnessed to drive turbines and produce electricity.
So the power literally comes from nature trying to balance itself out. That's incredible. What makes this a potential game changer?
Exactly. The real breakthrough potential here is its incredible reliability. Unlike solar or wind, which depend on the weather or time of day,
Right, intermittency.
osmotic power is a potential next-generation renewable energy source that isn't affected by weather or time of day as long as you have a river meeting the sea. It could provide a constant, predictable baseload supply of clean energy. That's a huge advantage for grid stability. The Fukuoka plant, for example, is expected to produce about 880,000 kilowatt hours annually. And it's actually being used to power a desalination facility right there.
Oh, that's a perfect synergy, isn't it? Using the meeting of fresh and salt water to make more fresh water.
Precisely. Very neat.
That reliability factor is absolutely key. Another interesting innovation, also from Japan, is small hydropower generation. Now, we often think of hydropower as these massive dams with huge environmental footprints. This sounds different.
It is very different. Small hydropower generation is designed to be a much more sustainable, renewable energy source. It strategically utilizes Japan's abundant water resources, all those rivers and elevation changes, but without requiring large-scale dams and reservoirs. Instead, it uses the natural flow of rivers, maybe existing irrigation channels, or small drops in elevation to generate electricity. Much lower impact.
Okay. And what's its efficiency like compared to other renewables like solar?
This is where it really shines. It boasts remarkably high electrical conversion efficiency, typically around 60 to 80%.
Wow, 60 to 80.
Yeah. Compare that to typical solar panels, which are usually in the 10 to 30% efficiency range. So you get a lot more electricity out for the energy potential available in the water flow.
That's impressive. What's the downside?
Well, its main disadvantage is that it is still affected by precipitation levels, If there's a drought, the river flow decreases, and so does power generation. But its widespread applicability across Japan's many rivers makes it a really promising tool for regional industrial development and revitalization, contributing significantly to a decarbonized society, especially in more remote areas. It's about smart, localized, efficient energy.
Okay. So pulling all these threads together now, we've explored such a diverse range of methods. Natural ones like forests and wetlands, high-tech ones like mineralization and direct ocean capture, new energy sources like osmotic power. What does this all mean for us? What's the big takeaway?
I think the big picture here is crystal clear. There is no single silver bullet. There's no one best method that's going to solve everything. Instead, the solution has to lie in deploying a whole variety of these approaches. We need a portfolio. And they need to be carefully balanced, considering cost, reliability, the technological readiness, the feasibility in different geographical contexts. The ultimate goal has to be this powerful synergy, drastically reducing our new emissions through efficiency and renewables, and actively removing the legacy CO2 that's already warming the planet. It's a global grand challenge, and it demands every single tool we have in the toolbox.
And as these technologies, especially the newer ones, start to scale up, what important considerations must guide us? What do we need to keep front of mind?
Well, this raises probably the most important question. How do we ensure that our solutions don't inadvertently create new environmental problems? We saw the concerns with ocean chemistry, for example. And alongside that, how do we foster the kind of global collaboration and investment needed for widespread adoption of these diverse strategies? Because climate change is a global problem. The scale of human ingenuity and effort going into these challenges is truly incredible. It really is. But it's absolutely critical that we continue to rigorously research, develop, and independently, transparently assess the environmental impacts as these technologies scale. It has to be a journey of continuous learning and adaptation.
It's definitely clear that humanity's ingenuity is fully engaged in this fight,
Yeah.
exploring every avenue from, planting trees and restoring wetlands to engineering artificial seashells and deep-sea carbon injection. It really is a testament to what's possible when we collectively turn our minds to a huge challenge.
It absolutely is. And maybe a final thought to leave our listeners with. Given the immense scale of this problem and this incredibly diverse, interconnected web of solutions we've explored today, what role do you think further innovation, perhaps in areas we didn't even touch on much, like advanced materials science or maybe synthetic biology and biological engineering, what role will they play in accelerating these efforts over the next decade? And crucially, what ethical considerations must guide that acceleration?
That's a great question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the cutting edge of carbon management and renewable energy. We really hope it's given you a renewed sense of what's possible and maybe some things to think about.